His name is known throughout the Philippines, hung on every other street sign. A man apart with countless statues erected in his honor, their number alone exceptional. His words ring in the heads of students, echoing in the halls of schools across the archipelago. His achievements far-reaching, the heraldry of public hospitals and financial institutions. His image, the subject of Philippine pop culture. Like a silent force, the name Jose Rizal surrounds the Philippines. But for me, all these stood like unrelated pieces of a quilt, gradually revealing a thread that leads to the city of Dapitan, where the way of the exile await. Dr. Jose Protasio Rizal Mercado y Alonzo Rialonda, or simply Jose Rizal, is the Philippines' national hero. Born in 1861, he is undoubtedly the most distinguished Filipino figure. The 7th out of 11 children by Señor Francisco Mercado Rizal and Doña Teodora Alonzo, Jose Rizal grew between the busy life in Calamba, Laguna and Manila. His innate intelligence set him apart as he pursued his studies at the Ateneo de Manila and the University of Santo Tomas. Well-traveled, he brought his intellect and charm to many parts of the world, enjoying the company of many prominent individuals. A polymath, he was an ophthalmologist, sculptor, painter, teacher, agriculturalist, historian, a polyglot of at least 10 languages. He dabbled into fields of architecture, economics, ethnology, martial arts, and the list goes on and on. Widely celebrated as a pride of the Malay race, Jose Rizal is most known as a nationalist and an advocate whose unwavering devotion to reform for the Filipino people ultimately led him to be exiled to the remote town of Dapitan before his eventual execution in 1896. But all this can be read off a book, or studied in school, or chanced upon on a late-night showing of a local documentary. What is left to be explored is the experience that lay await when one travels to Dapitan, a cornerstone of Philippine history. I took a plane from Manila headed southwest to Dipolog City, the entry point to Zamboanga del Norte province, and my gateway to Dapitan. I remarked at the expedience of travel today. What should have taken days by sea in 1892, the year Rizal arrived in Dapitan, now took no more than 2 hours. Something must be said about the relationship between Dipolog, Dapitan, and Rizal. That's what I'm here to figure out. Dipolog may today be the capital of Zamboanga del Norte province. But what needs to be understood is that during Rizal's time, Dipolog was merely a barrio or a village in Dapitan. The two were once the settlements of Moro, Visayan, and Subanan peoples, their histories interwoven by years of friction between cultures. In time, conflicts molded its culture, leaving behind the people of this greater Dapitan. It is in the Pasalubok Circle in Dipolog, where a monument of 3 men carrying an overflowing bowl to the heavens, that they honor their blend of rich heritage. So it must be said that Rizal did not arrive to a desolate town. Instead, he was exiled into a thriving community of thousands, whose heritage produced Dipolog's 3 most important figures. As one approaches the Dipolog City Hall, 3 men encased in bronze stand as a proud reminder of the city's achievements. Honored are Eugenio Redulla Margate, responsible for the Margate system of farming, Reverend Father Nicasio Yebes Patangan, the first Filipino priest of Dipolog, and Honorable Pascual T. Martinez, the first appointed mayor of Dipolog, whose likeness much resembles that of Rizal. By 1892, Dapitan had become a politico-military district, heavily influenced by the religious institutions. Today, Dipolog and Dapitan still consider themselves to be quite a God-fearing people, proven a distance from the city in Linabo Peak. 3,003 steps. That is how many steps you're gonna have to take to the Linabo Peak. I hope I have the strength for this one. The Linabo Peak is a half-day trek to the summit. In tribute to the Calvary, every 100 or so steps presents a Station of the Cross. Meant for religious devotion, its promise of a grand view does much to capture the fancy of tourists as well. And halfway into it, I'm kinda tired. I guess I'll just ask these people, what does it look from upstairs? Defeated by limited daylight, I head back to Dipolog proper. There may be many places to achieve a religious experience, but here at the Holy Rosary Cathedral, it holds important pieces linked to Rizal. Past the devout group of Catholics, beyond the rising arches and further down into its hand-carved ceiling, was an altar believed to be designed by no other than the very subject of my quest. Asking around about other relics of Rizal, I was pointed to the direction of Galeria Indelencio, owned by Eddie Tabancura.
These are my artworks.
These are all yours.
This one, wine glasses.
Is there any particular inspiration that you usually take from?
Usually a sun and crosses. This one is like a Hindu goddess, but it's an angel. Actually, it's not an Indian goddess because there is a cross over there. And this one is a third eye.
We're looking into some Rizal history. Do you have any artworks that reflect on?
I think Rizal loved the people in the Dapitan and Sumbongan del Norte, so he loved the place and he encouraged people to do some art, like he has a student before. And I heard that the Cathedral in Dipolog City is one of his project, the altar.
An artist and an art collector, he moved out of Manila to open up an artist's nook in Dapitan, a 20-year-long investment on his part. Upon entering, there was a very raw but Gaudi-esque impression about his work. Broken pieces of glass and ceramic turned into mosaic functional figures. The intention of the place was to achieve rest and spiritual rejuvenation, set in this tropical garden. There were clues, bits and pieces of Rizal. But could these be the only thing left of him? Or perhaps I wasn't looking hard enough. To find out more, I needed to head to Dapitan City. Transport to the city entails a hired van or a trike. As I head to Dapitan, I was invited to explore a means of traveling to the city in a less conventional way. This is Dapitan River, whose tributaries extend from all the way to Misamis Occidental, from the mystic mountain of Mount Malindang. We're gonna try the river cruise and see where it'll lead us. The Dapitan River passes through 3 or 4 towns. Already aware of the midsummer fever, locals took to the clean river for refuge. In Rizal's writings, he describes his initial experience as a vacation of sorts. I can see how. The cruise was on a quiet 5-meter wide pontoon, pushed in from behind by a humming motorboat. It allowed for a pleasant sail around the winding pass. It's truly places like this that spring a spell of romance. Accompanied by music, we sailed past the Liburan River and headed for the Dapitan Bay to watch the sunset cruise. To this moment, I had not laid eyes on Dapitan. From a distance, it seemed like a quiet town, even sleepy. I sure am in for a big surprise. Up in a few, Exile can be lonely. Good thing there's a friend or two just around the bend. The coast of Dapitan curves to form private coves, and as the sun sets, it catches fire with an amber brilliance. It's too bad Rizal arrived in the evening of that 7th of July, 1892. Perhaps he would have been comforted by the gripping beauty of it all. Instead, he arrived at 7 in the evening after a harrowing ride on the MV Cebu and was greeted not by a friendly face, but civilian guards. Before the sun sank, the cruise brought me to the Kak Resort, my home for the next day or two. On the shore, waiting for me, was a good friend, Charisse. After a bit of catching up, Charisse was quick to introduce me to a few local welcoming ceremonies unique to the Kak. Every night, during the evening feast, a show of local talent are laid out for guests. Tonight was the spirit of Hawaii. And guess who's joining me next?
Awesome, check it out.
Early the next day, Charisse couldn't wait to show me around the resort. The Kak is a restful place enjoyed by almost anyone looking for a seaside retreat, with all the basic necessities I need while on my self-imposed exile. The Kak is expansive. It has about 150 rooms, a golf course, swimming pools, a tennis court, 2 restaurants and a stable. The place is green with a lush cover of trees keeping out the heat. Time to get the blood pumping, as we dare to climb the irony that is the repeater trail. Struggling up 300 steep steps to the viewing deck takes you to the highest point in the resort. High above, you could see the lay of the land and vaguely the nearby islands we plan to visit. But of course, its most prized feature is the view of the beach. Who would think that here you could have the powdery sands of Boracay just by the resort? The beachfront hugs the 750-meter coast of the Cove, where a manner of sporting activities can be enjoyed. After all that climbing, we decided that lazing about on the sailboat would be the best. Before noon, we headed out to sea to experience more of the Isle in Exile. Located roughly 14 kilometers off the coast of the village of Tagilon is Sinilog Island. Surrounded by white sand beach, the crystal clear water is popular among local divers. The people that reside here are mostly local fishermen, a popular source of livelihood in Dapitan and more so in Dipolog, who is the country's capital for bottled sardines. Popular brands like Montaño, Zaragoza, and Mendoza originated from fishing family businesses in the city. A multi-million peso industry that's put Dipolog on the map. But it seems, long before that, Rizal had already found the greater value of these seas. Rizal writes in his letters to his brother-in-law Manuel T. Hidalgo. Pukutan, or trawl fishing, as he wrote, is a method of commercial fishing using long, wide nets. It's no surprise that today, the many armed trawl boats can be seen docked along its shores. Nearby is the island of Aliguay, another white sand marvel. The sand here is more coarse, but the wealth beneath equally gratifying. Here in the company of a 4-piece band, we dined like pelagic princesses on a host of grilled seafood and kinilaw na isda, or raw fish stewed in spices and vinegar. It's worth saying that currents on both islands can be rough, and the beachfront dips abruptly, so it's best to err on the side of caution for inexperienced swimmers such as myself. But by the afternoon, on our return, I hit the road again in search of Rizal. Admittedly, the Kak seems like a welcome distraction to my quest. But that said, it did give a better idea as to how much of Rizal's writings about Dapitan still rang true today. Without another second to lose, I bid Charisse a momentary farewell to meet with a friend of hers, who's a resident of Dapitan.
Okay, so I don't know anything about this place. Where am I? What am I doing?
This is Rizal National Park, and first we're gonna visit the museum. We're gonna visit the place and check out all these houses here. But first, we should visit the museum.
Okay, cool. Wait, so what's in this Rizal Park? What am I to expect here? There's the Rizal Museum.
Inside are some of his clothes and some of his works, but not the original crafts, only the facsimile replicas of it.
Inside the museum was a repository of Rizal's experience here in Dapitan. Mounted along the hall are some of his writings while in Dapitan, his clothes, several bas-reliefs, as well as iconic images of him with his family and his martyrdom. Outside in the remaining 10-hectare lot dedicated to the park, Rizal's home was rebuilt. In his correspondence with his good friend Ferdinand Blumentritt, he describes his home as one square, another hexagonal, and a third octagonal, all of bamboo, wood, and nipa. Within the square house, or Casa Cuadrada, Rizal and his visiting mother, sister, and nephew lived. In the octagonal, or Casa Redonda, lived his students that grew under his tutelage and became prominent figures. The third is a chicken pen. He eventually opened up the Casa Hospitales, a clinic, where in most cases he had given free medicine. Although he had other properties, it was here where he stayed the longest, from 1893 to 1896. He often spoke of his garden with pride, saying in a letter once, by a heart-shaped rock, he was imbued with poetry. Rizal called it Mi Retiro, or My Retreat, where he took inspiration from Dapitan, the city he briefly called home. By this very rock, it is believed that he and Josephine Bracken had said their vows. Today, the park is in the care of the local religious sector called the Rizalistas of the Kingdom of God.
Kami ang nag-maintain dito, maglinis, paligid dito mga kasamahan namin. Ang ginagawa namin dito, bakit kami nag-volunteers? Kasi para sa amin kasi, si Dr. Rizal, hindi siya ordinary na tao. Yung malaking puno na yan, yung tinatawag na baluno, ano na yan, malapit na yan sa 200 years. Kasi pagdating ni Dr. Rizal dito, mayroon na siyang bunga.
But it wasn't all bamboo and nipa here. To my surprise, April insisted that I try out the bathroom. With an extra 5 pesos, a few luxuries could be purchased in the Rizal Shrine. Who'd think a fancy air-conditioned bathroom would be one of the highlights in a place like this? Slowly, I was gaining a better understanding about how people thought of, treated Rizal here. Intrigued at all this, April took me to the town center, where to this day memories of Rizal remain, down to the street signs.
This is the map of Mindanao made by Dr. Jose Rizal with the help of Father Francisco Paula de Sanchez, his teacher in Ateneo. He was a Jesuit priest, and this map was built to motivate as a motivating device to teaching geography to his students. So it's based on Father Pedro Morillo Villarde's map.
Oh, okay. And so the land part is obviously the grass, and the water part is this cement, or the other way around?
He used to outline this with rattan and seashells. Originally, yes. Some of the acacia trees around the plaza was planted by Dr. Jose Rizal himself. Tinulungan siya ni Captain Carnicero, the guard, the political guard of Dr. Jose Rizal in Dapitan City. So minus the elevated borders, which was constructed in 1996, the rest is original.
So he planned, in essence, the city center.
Yes. He planned gayahin daw yung mga those plazas, the gardens he saw in Europe. So that's why he come up with like this, the plaza. It already existed when he came here. He further beautified it lang.
So you lived here for most of your life?
Since I was born.
Yes. And so you would have a good idea, what is it with the Dapitan, Rizal, and how has that been part of people from Dapitan? How has that changed their lives?
Maybe it's because Dr. Jose Rizal have contributed a lot to the Dapitanons. He was our first doctor in Dapitan, and he also gave us the first lights in Dapitan City. These whole acacia trees where he hung these tree trunks with this coconut oil lamp. The budget came from the money paid by one of his clients before. The water system, he was the one who parang nagbigay ng yung waterworks. Yes, yun. And also, he was so kind that he gave free medical services to the people.
My walk with April was enlightening, and though I could neither refute or confirm any of it, what's significant was that he was thought of in a special way. To end the day, April brought me to B&B, where I could enjoy the barbecue by the bay while watching the sun set in a quiet, restful city of Dapitan. So it is that Dapitan earned its title the Shrine City, due to its dedication to the memory of Jose Rizal that went more than surface deep. At night, I had but one shrine left to visit. Coming up, what the evening reveals as I'm ready for a final surprise. At the end of my quest along this historical trail, I headed to Santa Cruz Beach. It was here where it all began. The Punto Desembarco de Rizal on Dapitan. A 6-foot statue carefully encased in bronze tell of that fateful July night. So it began here, what he would change, what his story would tell of the city, and what the city would speak of him a century later. From once the tiny coconut oil lamps that lined the plaza to the dazzling evening displays in the parks today, Dapitan shines most at night. At the Gloria de Dapitan, the main business district, I was brought back to the present, where people have gathered for the evening. The night, lively, full of colors, music, and lights. Perhaps this was not what Rizal had in mind, but certainly he would have mused at all the changes that had come to Dapitan. No change seems to be more apparent than what it offers through the gates of the Fantasyland. Meeting up with Charisse, we explored the wonder world found within a child's dream. Tummy-churning rides, games, and possibly the best horror walkthrough in the country. I was pleasantly surprised that the Shrine City, known for its wealth of history, was also a fun place. So much for thinking this place was some rustic town. At the end of the day, when you come to Dapitan, much has changed from the time Rizal first came. But the spirit of the man that moved Dapitan forward remains. A brochure about Dapitan put it best. He found it to be a sleepy town, but soon it became wide awake. And so it is that Dapitan continues to stir excitement in those that visit it.
I can't breathe. I can't breathe. I'm like so shaky. I'm so sweaty. That was the worst.